So, welcome to the Quantum Leap podcast. We have Lisa Cain on, who specializes in marketing for small business. And I'm excited to bring Lisa on because she's such a wealth of knowledge about small business marketing, small business issues, just all things, marketing, business development, consulting. And she also has a lot of great resources on her website as well, so which we're going to talk about. And I did want to give my co-host Cory Nott opportunity to chime in too. He's known Lisa for even longer than I have. Cory, would you mind just giving a quick introduction and how you've known Lisa?
Cory Nott, business coach and co-owner of Take Wing Coaching. And I guess I've known Lisa through BNI for, it's probably been, well, how long have you been in BNI? Since the start of ARC?
No, I was in BRN since starting in 2008.
Okay, so I kind of hit the Oakland area around 2011, so started meeting people around then. Yeah. It's also self-paced workshops. We are adding a sales workshop in about a week or so here, and we'll be adding new workshops every few weeks. And it's also a place to network and meet other people from all over, and share some expertise. Finally, the price is set to be just right.
Truly is, and we're going to get that scripted plug down here sooner or later, but for now we're going to give our authentic take on Lyft. So we'll put the links down and check that out if you haven't. With that, I wanted to get right into our interview with Lisa, and does marketing packages for small business, and you can really customize your package. She's also really essentially a mastermind on marketing. I've used her to really help me with my marketing and my marketing plans and business plans. And if you present things to her, she really knows how to take those and transfer them into something that's workable in the real world. And I was just reading actually in Think and Grow Rich that really every solid business has to start with a viable plan. And if you don't have a solid plan, you're not going to have a business. And I really think that's one of Lisa's strengths is to, help give you a plan to grow your business. And with that, I wanted to ask Lisa to just introduce herself and her professional background.
So I was talking about how important learning is to me, and it's in my tagline, learn it, do it, profit. And I think, as I said, when I was a kid, it was important to me. I went on to get an MBA part-time while working, and then got a PhD in marketing. And so all of that is, indicative of my commitment to learning more and being there for my clients and helping them to learn. So being a learner and a teacher. And I think that's probably enough for me to say about my background at the moment. I have been working with, let me say one more thing. I've been working with small businesses for a very long time, since around 2000, 2001 in some capacity, and really have a sweet spot in my heart for small local businesses. They make a big difference in our communities, and I think it's so important that they get the resources that they need.
Great, thank you. How have you been adapting to this COVID-19 environment, and how do you see other business owners or your clients adapting to the current climate?
Yeah, thank you for that. So one thing is doing Zoom, usually staying on the call and not getting dropped off. And that has not been that hard of a pivot for me personally. I did meet clients in person before, but I was also meeting several of them on the phone. I had a Zoom account for a long time. So doing the pivot to Zoom for one-on-one meetings was pretty easy. Migrating some of my workshops and learning to do networking and referral marketing online has been a harder, learning curve, because that wasn't so natural before. But I think through BNI and other networking groups, there's been a lot of opportunities. People do want to connect online, and so finding those has gotten easier as we've moved through the time. I think the other thing I've seen with my clients is the ability, the resilience of so many small business owners is just inspirational to me. I have a client who has a Pilates studio, which of course she had to close, but she was able to pivot, run classes on Zoom, run one-on-one privates on Zoom, didn't really have a hiccup. was able to keep all of her costs covered. She did get some of the resources available through the government, but she's used those for other things other than keeping payroll going. She's been able to really keep the business going in a very strong way. And looking at where that can take her. She has clients now from outside of the Bay Area who she expects to be able to keep. She's changed up some of her offers, so now she has an unlimited online option for unlimited classes, which of course she didn't have before. So seeing that is really inspirational, and there have been other clients like that as well who have been able to make lemonade out of lemons.
Thank you, Lisa. And with that, I want to turn it over to my co-host, Cory Nott, for a few questions. Cory, you there? I know you're muted, but...
I am sorry. I had to bring up the questions. You'll have to edit that little part out. So Lisa, given this whole new COVID environment and everybody pivoting, and it seems like that there's a lot of competition for resources, especially as, things move online and people are kind of aiming the same direction. So what advice do you have for business owners in marketing in this new environment?
Yeah. Well, I think a few things I've seen. One area where there's actually less competition than there was before is in Google AdWords, Google advertising. I have a client who had been advertising on Google for my clients, a relatively big budget, about $10K a month with AdWords. And when this first happened, we slashed it because we just, they weren't expecting to sell anything for a little while. Their audience is restaurants. So we slashed it. We didn't go to zero. We slashed it. But the return on that investment we bumped it up a little bit. I don't know if Google actually gave lots of grant money out to people. They dropped it into your AdWords account. If you had an AdWords account set up for a while, they would drop a certain chunk of change. And the competition for the words has gone down because a lot of other people stopped spending as much. So that's an interesting place to put some resources that you might not have wanted to invest in the past, especially if you can, what we call the long tail, choose very specific words that are not as competitive necessarily as the really broad ones. So surprisingly, that's one place to do that. I think a couple other places we have seen the space of running online events get more crowded. However, I think there's just obviously so much more demand for that now because people can't go to meet someone in person. And so I think differentiating, like David and you have done with this, and sort of bringing in an audience that's meant for the small business owner or that type of folk, where they might not have spent time on a webinar like this in the past, now they're more available to do that. So that's another thing that I'm seeing and encouraging. And of course, I'm always a fan of email marketing. That's still popular. People are still looking at their email and opening it. That's an opportunity for a lot of businesses to bump up their email marketing and other social media as well. Yeah, thank you. So as I mentioned before, my tagline is Learn It, Do It, Profit. On my website under the Learn It, there's a bunch of resources there. In particular, I have my top favorite books. I have a whole page for my Fab 5 in different categories. Some are general marketing, some are general business. A few are kind of more personal development type categories. I love to read, and those are a lot of classics, especially about marketing and persuasion and consumer behavior. It's a category that I am fascinated by. So there's a lot there. I also have some online classes, both ones that are available Udemy platform for a relatively low price, and also ones that are available live. So next Thursday, I have a MailChimp marketing workshop that I'm doing live. I'd love to see some of you guys there. And then I also have a bunch of blog posts, as you can see, that we're on right now. He's on my blog. And I tend to write about things that I see in the world. Those go out in my approximately weekly newsletter. I'm not as good as I tell my clients they ought to be, and as I am for my clients in terms of my frequency. But this past week, I wrote about some of the surprising things that you're seeing in marketing around COVID in particular. So I'd gotten a couple emails from one from Macy's and one from Penny's. I'm on their lists, and I love to see what people are doing with marketing. And they were about back to school. But of course, we're not going back to school in a building. We're going back to school in a variety of different ways. And so they were trying to position the whole back to school market as still being necessary, even if your kids are not going into a building. They still might want or need, knew this, knew that, knew the other thing. Honestly, I thought it was a little bit of a stretch, but there you go. Last week's was about, and I need to get these up on the blog page, but last week's was about Disney World reopening, and what my impression is that that's really going to damage their brand in the long run. We're supposed to think of Disney as the happiest place on earth, great for kids, all of that. During the week that Florida was having a very bad time with coronavirus seemed like not such a great brand decision from my perspective. Those are some of the resources and some of the ways that people can continue to learn, signing up for my newsletter and looking at the books and the workshops.
Yeah, I did want to turn it over to questions here. I just had one more question since we're doing pretty good on time. Somebody who's done communications and marketing, mostly in the public policy and political sphere in my former career, I've really noticed how there's been such a huge shift in kind of what works, like things that worked maybe a year or two ago or even 5 years ago, all of a sudden don't work anymore. And if you're not really tuned into that, or if you don't have an expert who can help you navigate the new environment, you're really just spinning your wheels. For example, I see that, Facebook now only show close to maybe like 5 or 10 of your friends, even though you might have like 1,000 friends and only 5 people will see it. So we're really there's really some illusions about what, the benefits of social media. I know you mentioned email marketing, which I am a big fan of as well. I know there's been some constraints on email, but could you just talk about the importance of staying current and things that you see that maybe don't work anymore, or, insights on that issue?
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of my favorite and conversely least favorite parts of my work. Right? So especially on the social media end, TikTok. My kids are on TikTok more than I could imagine they would be on something. A year ago, they were on Instagram all the time. Snapchat has maintained through there. So I'm lucky that I have, young adult, late teen kids to kind of keep me abreast of all of those topics that are reaching the younger market. But there's the social media world is always changing with what's the latest, newest thing. And the reality is, it's important to know that, but also to know whether it matters for your market. So, for example, if my market is not a young teen or a young adult, then maybe I don't need to think about TikTok so much. If my market is not likely to be on Twitter, then I don't need to worry too much about what's going on Twitter for my marketing efforts. I may want to use it for another purpose. So there's that combination of staying on top of what is relevant, but most importantly, on top of what is relevant for your audience. Because it doesn't mean that things are always going to be changing if your audience is older, more conservative, less likely to change what they're interacting with. So LinkedIn, for example, I've talked about people using LinkedIn for a decade plus, maybe 2 decades now. I'm not sure how long, a long time, because that's where we show up in our professional world. So if you're in a B2B situation and your B2B audience is on there, in particular, there are certain segments that are very heavily engaged in LinkedIn. So HR professionals, I see Bernadette nodding her head, are very likely to be on LinkedIn a lot. If your target audience is an HR professional, and I had a few clients for whom that was the case this spring, who had specific, temperature tests and other kinds of testing for employees who would be showing up at work, that can be a place to put some energy because those folks are on there. And it was incredibly successful, the campaign that we did for that one client. Got a lot of interest. They converted a couple of the folks there. So, and they're big contracts, so that was well worth it. I think I answered maybe too much, too little. I think I got you.
So Lisa, this is Cheryl. So to the LinkedIn piece and what David brought up a little earlier, like on Facebook, that I used to publish or post things and I'd have 143 views. And now I'm at something like sometimes 10 or 20. And I'm wondering, and this is fairly recent. So what do you think the change in the dynamic?
So on LinkedIn, are you talking specifically LinkedIn or Facebook or both?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. There's a lot more competition, right? So when
Okay.
I go look at LinkedIn, how long am I going to scroll? Either if I'm looking on my phone, how long am I going to scroll? Or how long am I going to scroll if I'm looking on a desktop? And now when that's the only option, or one of the, the number of options of where people can go to do that interaction has been limited. There's only so many things I'm going to be able to see on the screen.
I gotcha.
In 3 minutes. So the takeaway from that is post frequently. Don't think that once a week is going to work anymore, or once a day necessarily even is going to work anymore. You can repeat your post. You've seen that, I think we saw that a lot with Twitter a while ago, where people would repost very similar posts over and over again. And I think that's going to, again, you're going to be competing. It's going to get a little cluttered, but if you want someone to see something, you might have to do it more frequently.
Gotcha.
So Lisa, I have a question about LinkedIn advertising. So you said that with Google, there is less competition. Mm-hmm. Is that different with LinkedIn? Is there more competition with LinkedIn versus?
Interesting question. I don't know that I don't know for sure one way or the other with LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. The LinkedIn price points to get started are higher than Google AdWords or Facebook or Instagram. Mm-hmm. So you can't try something for $50 very easily on LinkedIn. You've got to be in the $200-300 range to get started. Okay. What we found when I did the campaign with that client I was talking about earlier was we got really good visibility. They have a really nice lead collection process built into the LinkedIn advertising campaign options so they basically capture if you use a lead gen form, it captures the person, their company, and several characteristics that are available in their LinkedIn profile, mm-hmm. Right in the one form. So you can kind of see what's going on, and you can make an option for them to give you additional information in the lead gen form that's available. So it's really nice and streamlined. And so when you make that call to follow up, you have a lot of information so that you're well prepared for the phone call, versus some of the incoming stuff that you might get on a Google ad where you just, is this person well qualified or not well qualified? I don't even know. But you can get that information really quickly on the LinkedIn process for filling out the lead gen form.
Okay, and that one other question. So around time frame for a marketing campaign. Mm-hmm. So what would you say the best lead time is for doing a marketing campaign, B2B on LinkedIn?
For an event or
for an event, a workshop?
So this workshop. Mm-hmm. I think starting a process 4 to 6 weeks beforehand is a good timeline. I wouldn't go too much beyond that, because people, especially now, nobody knows what they're doing.
Right. Okay.
I mean, you may even want to tighten that up these days. I'm trying to think that through a little bit. Will people commit to something that's, even 2 weeks away right now when they're not sure? I think in an HR role for your market, they probably will. They're sure enough 3 to 4 weeks out what's happening. But in some other categories, you might not people might not be able to make that commitment. And if it's a workshop type of a thing versus a, 2 or 3 day
conference or something,
then it's, that 3 to 4 weeks is probably plenty.
Okay.
The conference, you obviously need more time because people do have to block their schedule out for longer.
Thank you.
Lisa, I've got a question. Hi, nice to see you.
Hi, Steve.
So for someone like me who's been relying on organic search and doing pretty well, but I'm seeing like on Google, there's a whole bunch of advertising competitors above me. They're nicely labeled as ads. But, do you think that, and really what I'm seeing now is getting fewer calls too, maybe it's because of the ads, but what would be a good way to transition into AdWords on a local basis?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't know if the competitors, are they franchise types or are they local like you, or are they?
Most of them are franchise. There's a couple locals.
Okay, so So a couple of things that I've seen work well, especially on more constrained budgets, is to make sure that you're using good specific words. So when someone does the search and they see these very broad franchise folks, they know that those are franchise folks and that they might not be what they want. So the next step then for someone is, okay, well, I'm going to either include the geography, I'm going to include the word Oakland or East Bay or Berkeley or whatever, or I'm going to be more specific in my search. So am I looking for a videographer? Am I looking for an event videographer? Am I looking for a wedding videographer? Am I looking for a business conference video? Am I looking, what am I, video editing? So what are those words that are going to get more narrow, where there's going to be less competition? And people will go to those words when they get overwhelmed by the first page that's not a match. So I don't know if you can think of specific words that you're looking for that would meet that criteria, but that would be the direction I would head.
I just wrote down several based on your suggestions.
Great.
Lisa, I have another question. You mentioned that networking, it's changed obviously with COVID, and I'm used to networking events face-to-face. How are you finding people are networking now for referral-based marketing?
Yeah, so what I'm seeing is I was helping a client with Eventbrite yesterday. I went to do a little research on Eventbrite before my call with her just to see how things were coming up. There are a lot of free online things now that are being posted on Eventbrite in a range of categories. So that's one way to find events that might have your target audience in them. And then thinking about, like, for you, what would someone, I think that one of the great things right now for someone who is targeting people 62 and older is that all of those people now know how to use Zoom, and they didn't 4 months ago. They've learned it for their religious organization, their family meeting, their whatever it is. They are capable today in a way that they were not before, and they weren't even interested in learning before. So they're now exploring other things as well. Where are they going to show up? What are topic areas that are going to be relevant for them that I would look for those kinds of events. Think about what they're interested in and where you might be able to find them. And can you only operate in California? You can operate.
I think we're in 48 states, so I can go, yeah.
That's awesome, right? That's a whole new way to do business. So it doesn't have to be local for you. And people are used to Zoom, so it makes it a lot easier.
And then, thank you, that wrote down a lot of good tips too. So then for the professionals that I got my referrals from, I used to go in person or it's different now, and wondering how to even target those markets, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's where LinkedIn can be very useful, is to build your network on LinkedIn and then reach out to them for either a Zoom meeting or a phone call, or if you and they are comfortable with it, 6 foot apart, walk around somewhere. I think we're probably moving into that zone now where people feel like if they're masked and 6 feet apart and outside, there's some space for meeting in person in certain situations to build that rapport. Whether it's a match for them or not, I'm not sure, but I think there is starting to be some space for that kind of a meeting.
Thank you. Perfect.
Great.
With that, we're just about at time here, so I did want to thank Lisa for coming on and sparking a great discussion there too. I know there's really no shortage of marketing advice and interest these days, so thanks everyone for the great questions. And Lisa can put her information in the chat in case anybody doesn't have it, or feel free to reach out and I can give you her email and her phone number as well. But we definitely will check back in with Lisa at some point soon. So thanks a lot. And thanks, Cory.
Thank you, Lisa. That was perfect.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank you for hosting, David and Cory.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Great.
Bye-bye now.
Well,
Bye-bye.